Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Today, we're not just, looking at the battlefield from afar. We're digging into the very ground beneath it. Specifically, we're talking about the shifting names of America's military installations. And this isn't just about signs on gates or new ceremonies. It's really a close look at policy, at history, and how the past keeps influencing the present and, well, the future of the U.S. military. We've pulled together quite a stack of material for this one: detailed timelines, study guides, the latest AP reporting. It's all here. Our mission today: to cut through the noise, really examine the motives, both the stated ones, maybe the not-so-stated ones, behind these renamings, and figure out what it all really means for you, for the folks in uniform, and for the nation's sense of self.
Absolutely. You might think, okay, a name, it's just a name, right? A simple label. But as we'll unpack today, these changes, these back and forths, they reflect some really deeply held beliefs and definitely some strategic political moves. We're going to connect the dots between the historical context, the recent policy shifts, and the very different views on whether these changes are, a necessary step forward, an evolution maybe, or as some critics are saying pretty loudly, if it's more of a cynical game of manipulation. It's definitely complex, layered with legal stuff, public perception. It really needs a careful, unbiased look to get the full picture.
Okay, so let's do that. To really get a handle on what's happening now, we need to rewind a bit first, right? Set the stage. What was the original push behind changing these base names back in 2023? What was going on in the country then?
Right, the timing and the atmosphere are absolutely critical here. These first changes, mostly under the Biden administration in 2023, they happen, and this phrase was used a lot, amidst a national reckoning on issues of race in America. Now, just to clarify for everyone, a national reckoning here means a period of really intense public soul-searching, often sparked by major events, forcing a hard look at systemic problems like racism and how symbols from the past might, keep those problems alive. Think about the context after George Floyd's murder, the widespread protests. The country was really grappling with its history of racial injustice, the legacy of slavery, and that spotlight landed squarely on public symbols, including military base names. These places are powerful symbols of the nation, aren't they?
Hugely powerful.
Yeah. So the core reason, the undeniable trigger for these specific changes, was that 7 major U.S. Army bases were named after Confederate leaders. And these weren't just like obscure historical figures. These were men who led or served the Confederacy, the very states that broke away from the Union fundamentally to keep slavery going. That act of secession, sparked by Lincoln's election and his stance against expanding slavery, led directly to the Civil War. So naming U.S. military bases symbols of the United States after men who fought against the United States to uphold slavery, well, that became incredibly hard to defend, especially during that period of national reckoning.
Right, the contradiction became pretty stark.
Exactly. So the stated purpose, the official reason for the 2023 changes, was basically to remove the glorification, the honoring of these figures. Individuals who, from this perspective, represented a really divisive and frankly morally unacceptable part of American history. It was an effort to get the military's public image, its symbols, lined up with more modern values, inclusivity, unity, racial justice. The idea was simple. The ground where our diverse modern military trains shouldn't celebrate those who tried to tear the country apart over slavery. It was about creating an environment where every single service member, no matter their background, felt the base honored a shared, inclusive American story, not a divisive one.
Okay, so it was about moving away from that specific historical tie.
Precisely. And as a very visible part of that, many of the new names chosen back then deliberately honored women or minorities or figures representing a, let's say, broader definition of American heroism. This showed a clear focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, trying to reflect that wider heritage, an effort to celebrate heroes from all corners of American society who served honorably, making the names reflect the actual diversity of the troops and the nation, like, Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Named for Confederate General Braxton Bragg, that became Fort Liberty. Pretty symbolic, right? Honoring a core American ideal. Or Fort Benning in Georgia, named for Confederate General Henry Benning. That was renamed Fort Moore. Honoring Lieutenant General Hal Moore and his wife Julia Compton Moore, figures known for service, resilience. Many saw these changes as, well, necessary, long overdue even, a step towards a more unified identity, leaving behind those divisive symbols.
Right. So 2023 was undeniably a move to align the military's image with modern values, boost inclusion, and cut ties with that specific part of the past, reflecting a wider view of heroism. But, as our sources are clearly showing now, that wasn't the end of the story, not a smooth path forward. Instead, the pendulum swung back pretty hard. This whole thing became, and still is, really contested ground. where history and ideology are clashing head-on. And this is where it gets, well, really fascinating and honestly pretty surprising for a lot of people watching this. Fast forward to 2025, our sources map out a really quick series of reversals. What's the main strategy behind Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's recent orders? And how is this actually playing out? I mean, how do you even try to go back to names that the law now says you can't use to honor their original namesakes?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because the big hurdle for the current administration was exactly that. How do you bring back names tied so strongly to the Confederacy without breaking federal law? Remember, that law explicitly stops the military from honoring Confederates now. So the strategy Secretary Hegseth is using, well, Mark Morial, head of the National Urban League, he put it very bluntly. He called it a difference without a distinction. He even accused the military of trying to be slick. It's a very sophisticated maneuver, legally and symbolically speaking. Controversial, definitely.
A difference without a distinction. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
So the actual action is quite specific. Secretary Hegseth signed orders to change the names of several bases back to their original names, like Fort Bragg, Fort Benning, and so on. And this is the crucial part, the legal dodge to get around the law against honoring Confederates, these restored names are now officially honoring new namesakes. Individuals who just happen to have the same last name as the original Confederate generals. It's a very precise, almost wordplay-based strategy, a linguistic tightrope walk, maybe. It lets them bring back the familiar sound, the historical echo of the old names, which appeals to some people, while technically following the letter of the law because they're honoring someone else entirely. The clear goal for many seems to be reestablishing that connection to the past's aesthetic, even if the legal paperwork points to a different person.
Wow. Okay. Can you walk us through the timeline? How quickly did this happen?
Yeah, the speed is notable. Let's look at the key events. February 2025. Secretary Hegseth signs the order bringing back Fort Bragg in North Carolina. Remember, that had become Fort Liberty in 2023. The key detail, the legal workaround. The new namesake isn't Confederate General Braxton Bragg, it's Private Roland Bragg, a World War II soldier from Maine. Served honorably, got a Purple Heart, totally different person, same last name. That lets the name Fort Bragg return, while technically honoring a non-Confederate American hero. Prime example of the strategy.
Okay, Private Roland Bragg, got it.
Then, March 7th, 2025, Fort Liberty is officially rededicated as Fort Bragg. Ceremony, new sign unveiled, making it very public. It wasn't just an internal memo, it was a deliberate public statement. Later in March 2025, after Bragg, Hegseth reverses the Fort Benning change that had become Fort Moore, the new namesake for Fort Benning. Fred Benning, a World War I figure, served with distinction, again, different Benning, and then April 16th, 2025, another ceremony at Fort Benning. Flag changed from Moore back to Benning, honoring Fred Benning.
So it's a pattern. Bragg, then Benning. Does it stop there?
No, not at all. Our sources say this applies to a total of 7 bases renamed in 2023. It's quite comprehensive. You've got Fort A.T. Hill in Virginia, named for Confederate General A.P. Hill. Now it honors Reverend Ambrose Peter Hill, an educator and civil rights activist, same surname. Fort Pickett in Virginia, originally Confederate General George Pickett, now honors George Pickett, a WWII veteran. Fort Robert E. Lee in Virginia, obviously, named for the Confederate general, now honors Robert E. Lee, a Korean War Medal of Honor recipient, different Robert E. Lee. Fort Gordon in Georgia, originally Confederate General John Brown Gordon, now honors Captain Gordon P. Gordon, a decorated WWII pilot. Fort Hood in Texas, named for Confederate General John Bell Hood, now honors Lieutenant General John B. Hood, a WWII and Korean War veteran. Fort Polk in Louisiana, named after Confederate General Leonidas Polk, now honoring Leonidas K. Polk, a Louisiana legislator and soldier in the War of 1812. And Fort Rucker in Alabama, originally Confederate Colonel Edmund Rucker, now honors Lieutenant Colonel Edmund W. Rucker, a highly decorated Tuskegee Airman from WWII. For every single one, it's the same exact strategy. Restore the original name, but assign it to a new, non-Confederate namesake with the identical surname. It's a really systematic effort to roll back the branding across these major Southern bases.
So if I'm really understanding the mechanics here, it's less a simple name change and more a deeply calculated move. Almost like legal jujitsu. You get the familiar name back with all the history and associations that appeal to certain groups. But technically, legally, you're honoring someone completely different. It really feels like a meticulously designed workaround, aimed at restoring a certain sense of the past without directly violating current law. Seems explicitly built to please those who like the old names while navigating a very specific legal restriction.
That's exactly right. And connecting this to the bigger picture, this strategy is sparking such intense debate because it tries to walk that incredibly fine line between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law Remember, federal law passed in the 2021 Defense Authorization Act based on the Naming Commission's work explicitly bars honoring Confederates. Period. That wasn't just a suggestion. It was Congress reflecting a broad desire to cut ties with those symbols in the military. So this new namesake, same surname approach is the administration's very calculated way around that law. It follows the letter, arguably, but critics are forcefully saying it completely violates the spirit.
And who are these critics? What exactly are they saying?
They're being very vocal, and the language is pretty strong. Mark Morial, head of the National Urban League, he's been right at the forefront. He calls it that difference without a distinction, arguing that for many people, the effect feels the same as honoring the Confederates again. He didn't mince words, accusing the military of trying to be slick. Morial insists it violates the spirit of the law, even if not the letter, because the intent seems to be reconnecting with those names regardless of who the new person is. And he asked this really provocative question, I'm quoting him here, "No country on earth would name its military base after people that try to overthrow the government. So why are people holding on to these names?"
That question really cuts deep, doesn't it?
Yep.
Questioning the core message it sends about loyalty and national value.
Wow, that's a direct challenge. Anyone else echoing that? Oh, yes. Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat from Rhode Island, he's the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. He feels the same way. He publicly slammed Hegseth's actions, calling it a cynical maneuver. And Senator Reed also hit that same point about letter versus spirit. He said, and again I'm quoting, "By instead invoking the name of World War II soldier Private Roland Bragg, Secretary Hegseth has not violated the letter of the law, but he has violated its spirit." This really shows the perception that, okay, maybe they found a loophole, but the whole point of the 2023 changes moving away from divisive symbols, fostering inclusion, is being deliberately undermined. Critics worry this sends a powerful symbolic message that clashes with efforts towards racial healing and unity in the military. And the fact that news outlets are reporting this so aggressively shows there's widespread concern. It's seen as more than just changing a sign. It's seen as a direct pushback against the values the military is supposed to stand for.
That language, slick, cynical, it's really quite something. It paints a picture not of just an administrative adjustment, but a deliberate move, an act designed to undermine what came before, and in the eyes of these critics, maybe implicitly legitimize names tied to a painful past, even with the new namesake strategy. What does this level of critical reporting tell us about why this scrutiny is needed? It's obviously not a popular policy across the board. And the strong reaction suggests these names carry immense historical weight for many people, weight that can't just be wished away or recontextualized by picking a new person with the same last name. It definitely demands this kind of close, critical look to understand the motivations and the ripple effects which go way beyond the base gates. And it's not just Army bases we're talking about, right? Our sources point to this trend spreading. It suggests a much broader policy shift happening, a more comprehensive effort maybe to realign military symbols across different branches, maybe even down to the state level. What else are we seeing?
You're absolutely right to ask that. How far does this go? What does it reveal about the scope of the administration's goals? Our sources confirm it's not just Army bases on land. The policy has definitely reached the Navy, specifically the USNS Harvey Milk. Secretary Hegseth announced in late June 2025 that this ship, a fleet replenishment oiler, is going to be renamed.
The Harvey Milk. That was a pretty significant name, wasn't it?
Hugely significant. The original namesake, Harvey Milk, was a major figure, a pioneering gay rights activist who was tragically assassinated. He also served honorably in the Navy during the Korean War, and importantly, he was the first openly gay elected official in California. Naming a ship after him was seen as a powerful statement of inclusion, of progress. Recognizing diverse contributions, especially LGBTQ+ service members, it signaled a more modern Navy identity. But the plan now is to rename the ship after a World War II sailor who received the Medal of Honor. Now, obviously, a Medal of Honor recipient is a hero deserving recognition, no question. But the effect of this specific change is to remove that groundbreaking namesake, Harvey Milk. It takes away a very prominent, very deliberate symbol of LGBTQ+ representation in the fleet. This particular move really seems to signal a shift away from honoring figures tied to modern diversity and inclusion efforts, fitting squarely into that broader anti-woke narrative we've been discussing.
And you mentioned state-level examples, too.
Yes, exactly. This isn't just happening at the federal level. It's being mirrored, even amplified, by political allies at the state level, showing a wider ideological current. In Louisiana, Republican Governor Jeff Landry announced in early June 2025 that the state's largest National Guard training site would get its old name back. Camp Beauregard, named after Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard, it had been renamed Camp Johnson. And Governor Landry wasn't subtle about his reasoning. He put out a social media post explicitly railing against what he called wokeism and championing the honoring of history. The post actually included an AI-generated image, get this, of a headstone with the word wokeism carved on it.
Wow. Okay, that's not subtle at all.
Not even slightly. He wrote, quote, "In Louisiana, we honor courage, not cancel it." And he added, quote, "Let this be a lesson that we should always give reverence to history and not be quick to so easily condemn or erase the dead, lest we and our times be judged arbitrary by future generations." So he frames the renaming not as just a name change, but as a direct fight against cancel culture, tying it directly into those larger political culture wars. It really shows a coordinated push across different levels to reverse what they see as ideological shifts in how military history and symbols are treated.
So definitely not isolated incidents. It looks like a concerted effort, doesn't it? Across military branches, even into state National Guard units, and all carrying very open, very political messages. It strongly suggests a wider cultural battle being fought using military names and symbols, a clear stand against what's often labeled wokeism, and an embrace of a more, let's say, traditional view of history and heroism. This isn't just about names on signs. It feels like it's about redefining what the military stands for and how it reckons with its own past. Which brings us right to the core, doesn't it? What does this mean for the military's direction and for the country? Our sources are pretty clear about the political drivers here. How do these specific actions fit into a larger political playbook, and what are the risks of having such ideologically driven changes inside our military?
Well, the link is being made very explicitly. This whole renaming push is being presented as directly aligning with former President Trump's broader agenda. The Associated Press reporting actually described these latest moves by Secretary Hegseth as, quote, "the latest move to align with Trump's purging of all programs, policies, books, and social media mentions of references to diversity, equity, and inclusion," unquote. That's a key takeaway. It frames these renamings not as standalone decisions about history, but as one piece of a much larger, coordinated ideological project across government. It's seen as extending a specific political philosophy right into the heart of the Defense Department, aimed at rolling back certain social and cultural initiatives.
And specifically targeting those DEI-related names from 2023.
Exactly. Think back to who was honored in 2023, often women, minorities, figures important to civil rights or LGBTQ plus history. So the current reversals directly counteract that DEI focus. They effectively erase those specific names and the symbolic gestures they represented. It's not just a neutral administrative swap. It's framed as a direct response to and a reversal of those specific DEI efforts that had been gaining ground. It sends a very clear signal about which historical stories and which current values are being prioritized now. For many observers, the goal looks less about military merit and more about a kind of cultural countermove.
Is there academic analysis backing that up?
Yeah. Yes. Stacy Rosenberg, she's an associate teaching professor at Carnegie Mellon's Heinz College. She gives a pretty direct assessment of the politics involved. She stated quite plainly, quote, "the latest move seems like a way to appeal to Trump's political base." This suggests a major motivation isn't just history or merit, but firing up a specific political group that responds well to anti-woke themes and a return to older symbols. And Professor Rosenberg asks a really sharp question. She wonders if the new namesakes truly have such a service record that warrants the honor, if the main driver is political. That really challenges the official justification, doesn't it? It implies the selection might be more about finding a convenient surname to hit a political target than about genuinely assessing the honoree's unique contributions. It basically asks, are we honoring these specific heroes, or are we just using their names to achieve a different political goal?
That's a tough question.
And Governor Landry's very public post about wokeism with the tombstone image, that just hammers the point home, leaves zero doubt about the political framing. He explicitly positions the renaming as a blow against a perceived ideology, solidifying the view that these aren't isolated choices, but part of a broader anti-woke campaign. Seeing a prominent governor use that kind of language about a National Guard site really shows how tightly these military naming issues are tangled up with wider political movements and the ongoing culture wars.
So boiling it down, the justification seems less about pure history or military honor and more like a deliberate ideological shift, actively targeting previous policies linked to diversity and inclusion. It raises some serious questions, doesn't it, about how we commemorate military service in such a polarized time. It's not just about whose name is on a building anymore. It's about whose values get cemented, whose get pushed aside or erased. And that has real long-term implications for the U.S. military, its internal unity, how it's seen here and abroad, Now, beyond all the ideology and politics, there's a really practical side to this, one that maybe gets overlooked. The cost. The actual dollars and cents is all this renaming and then re-renaming and efficient use of taxpayer money, especially when it seems driven by shifting political winds every few years. This feels like a place where aggressive scrutiny is absolutely warranted, pushing for transparency on the price tag of these ideological swings. What do our sources say about the cost and the practical side?
That's an incredibly important point, you're right. It comes down to resource management, financial responsibility, especially with public money. Stacy Rosenberg, the professor from Carnegie Mellon we mentioned, she specifically points out the, quote, inefficiency of renaming bases. And this isn't just, printing a few new letterheads. It's a major logistical and financial undertaking. It adds up fast.
How much are we talking about, roughly?
Well, think about the first round of changes from the Confederate names in 2023. The Naming Commission estimated that effort cost upwards of $21 million across all the affected installations. That covered everything: physical signs at gates, on buildings, updating official maps, changing uniform patches, reprinting stationery, updating digital records, website changes, tons of stuff. Now, reversing those changes, that likely means another multi-million-dollar bill, probably in the same ballpark, maybe even more now with inflation and supply costs. Just to put that $21 million, or potentially double that, into perspective for you listening, that's money that could fund significant military family support programs. It could buy new training simulators, help fix aging barracks, contribute to serious modernization efforts, real tangible things. Instead, it's being spent on symbolic changes, driven by ideology.
And is there transparency about the cost of these latest reversals?
That's the really concerning part, and it definitely justifies the kind of critical reporting you mentioned. Our sources explicitly say that no immediate cost estimate was available for changing all the signs and everything else for this current round of reversals. That lack of information is a huge red flag for anyone concerned about government spending, fiscal watchdogs, taxpayers. Without clear public numbers, how can anyone judge if these decisions are fiscally sound? How can officials be held accountable for potentially huge sums being diverted? It leaves the impression, frankly, that the political goal of restoring the names is more important than the cost, and the public just doesn't get to know the price tag. That fuels skepticism about the real priorities here.
It absolutely does. It's a completely valid point, and one that needs answers. While everyone's arguing about history and identity, real taxpayer dollars are being spent on this back and forth, apparently without much clarity on the total bill. The justification for that spending becomes central to any close examination. It forces us to ask, is this expense really serving the nation's best interest? Or is it just the cost of ideological battles playing out, maybe ignoring practical economics and accountability? That's a question that hits home for everyone who pays taxes. Okay, we've heard some really pointed criticisms calling this slick, cynical, undermining progress. But are there other ways to look at this? Are there any voices trying to find maybe not exactly a defense, but a different perspective? A silver lining, perhaps? Is there any argument that something positive could still come out of this very contentious process?
Yes, there are. Angela Betancourt offers a particularly interesting take. She's a public relations strategist, runs the Betancourt Group, and importantly, she's also a U.S. Air Force reservist, so she brings a unique blend of communication strategy and military experience. She doesn't ignore the controversy, but she frames the whole phenomenon, both the 2023 changes and the 2025 reversals, in a broader context.
How does she frame it?
She views the continuous renaming cycles as, quote, a form of branding for what each administration views the military should represent. That's a really interesting lens, isn't it? It suggests these changes aren't just about history or correcting wrongs, but are fundamentally about how different political leaders want to brand the military, how they want it perceived. From her view, these name changes become almost an expected part of political transitions. Each new administration wants to put its stamp on national institutions, including the military's image. It sort of normalizes the fluctuation, suggesting these names are dynamic reflections of current leadership's values, almost like a corporate rebranding, but for the armed forces.
Okay, so like a reflection of the current political leadership's vision. But does she address the specific controversy of reverting to Confederate-associated names?
She does. She acknowledges that people are, quote, upset about military bases reverting to a name associated with the Confederacy. She doesn't dismiss that at all, but she offers a counterpoint aimed at finding some positive value. She argues that the controversy over the name should not take away from the new namesake's heritage and legacy. Her point is crucial. even if the surname itself is problematic because of the Confederate connection. The actual person being honored, now Private Roland Bragg, Fred Benning, Lieutenant Colonel Edmund Rucker, the Tuskegee Airmen, they each have their own distinct honorable story of service to the U.S. She believes this method, despite the debate around it, quote, can be a way to honor diverse heroes. And she specifically highlights that African American and diverse heroes that should be honored can actually be recognized this way. For her, it seems to be about separating the political storm around the surname from the genuine merit of the new individual being honored. It's an attempt to salvage the recognition of real heroes from a messy political process.
So even amidst all the skepticism about the motives for the reversals, there's an argument that something good can still come of it. Finding the inherent worthiness of the new honorees, even if the name itself and the reason for bringing it back, is deeply controversial. It suggests that while the political strategy might be questionable, the service records of the people now being honored under those old surnames are still real and deserving of respect. Regardless of the turbulent political path that led to their name being put on the sign, it's like saying, okay, the process is flawed, but let's not ignore the actual heroes who might be caught in the middle of this fight. Which brings us to the biggest picture. What does all this cycling back and forth really mean for you listening right now and for the United States overall? This is clearly more than just names on military property. It touches on national identity, how we remember our history, the very principles guiding our institutions. These are deeply symbolic acts.
Absolutely. Connecting all these threads, the implications of this continuous renaming cycle are really far-reaching. They touch some fundamental aspects of American society. First, think about national identity and historical memory. What does it say? This constant back and forth shows a nation really struggling, still unresolved, about how to face its difficult past, especially the Civil War and slavery. The fact that names change with significant debate in 2023 can be so quickly undone just 2 years later suggests we haven't reached any kind of stable consensus on our own history. It paints a picture of a country where historical narratives are constantly up for grabs, easily contested, easily reversed based on who's in power. That creates a sense of instability about our shared story. History becomes less a fixed point and more a political battlefield, potentially leading to a kind of relativism where national symbols feel temporary, not enduring.
And what about inside the military itself?
Right, second point. Military cohesion and morale. Our sources don't detail this directly, but you have to wonder about the impact on the troops, especially in today's diverse military. These rapid, politically charged shifts raise questions about inclusion, respect for history, and whether leadership is prioritizing political messaging over, say, fostering a unified force. Imagine being a service member, especially from a minority background, who saw the 2023 changes as positive progress. Seeing those names revert, even with the new namesake tactic, could feel disheartening. It might send mixed signals about the military's real values. Does it create friction? Does it make people question who's really being honored? It could potentially impact recruitment, retention, maybe even how well units work together.
That makes sense. What else?
Third, it really throws a spotlight on the role of executive power. How quickly a new defense secretary under a new administration can sweepingly change things, even things as symbolic and historically loaded as base names, undoing work that came from commissions and public discussion. It shows the immense power of the executive branch to shape not just policy, but national symbols almost overnight. That sets a powerful precedent for future administrations potentially doing the same. Fourth, the taxpayer burden, which we touched on. That financial cost, even if they're not publicizing it now, is real. Money spent changing signs, documents, holding ceremonies again is money not spent elsewhere. It's a tangible consequence of these symbolic battles paid for by the public. And finally, maybe most importantly looking forward, it sets a potentially troubling precedent for future changes. Does this mean every new administration will feel the need to rebrand military bases to match its politics? Will these names just become political footballs, constantly changing every 4 or 8 years? That creates instability, a lack of continuity. It might even cheapen the honor of having a base named after you if it's seen as just a temporary political statement easily erased. It raises that huge question. Can these names ever achieve stable, widely accepted meaning in such a polarized country, or will they just keep reflecting our ongoing fight over who we are?
It really does paint a picture of a nation struggling with itself, doesn't it? Where even the names on our military bases become active battlegrounds for these much bigger cultural and political wars. A very visible sign of the ongoing debates about history, identity, and the fundamental character of the nation, playing out right where our armed forces live and train, affecting policy, perception, maybe even national unity itself.
And ultimately, you have to ask, What does it really mean when the very names intended to inspire unity and reflect national values become the focus of such deep division? Reversing and re-reversing based on shifting political winds, not on some shared understanding of history. What kind of legacy does this constant churn leave for the next generation of service members? Will they look at these changing signs and wonder about the consistency of the nation's values, the stability of its memory?
That is a powerful question to sit with. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Are these renamings, at the end of the day, truly about honoring heroes? Or are they more a symbol of something much bigger, a deeper conflict playing out across the country about who we are, what we value, and what parts of our past we choose to lift up or push away? That brings us to the end of this analysis on the ongoing controversies surrounding military base renaming. We hope diving into the details, the motivations, and the potential impacts has given you a clearer picture of this really complex situation. If you found this discussion valuable, please do like this episode, share it with others who appreciate fact-based analysis, and make sure you subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network for more investigations like this one. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing you these insights.
And we genuinely want to know what you think about all this. It's a complex issue with strong feelings on all sides. Please share your perspectives in the comment section below. Let's get a conversation going. Also, for more updates and related discussions, do follow us on social media. You can find all the links you need right there in the description. Until next time, stay informed.